everyone. Welcome back to Lobby's Sounds of Session podcast. We are at the end of week 2 with session, and we have a very special guest joining us today. Our past Sounds of Session have included legislators, but today we have a former legislator and Governor Landry's new Chief of Staff, Julie Emerson. Julie, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, absolutely. I'm trying to build a phone tower here for the mic, and it's falling over. That's not going to work.
Some innovation with the Lobby Podcast Studio. And we also have another special guest, Lobby President and CEO, Will Green.
Hey, yeah, good morning, Mary Beth. This is exciting, and it's a great opportunity to meet and discuss a lot of exciting topics with a great longtime friend of Lobby. And it's so cool for me. Julie and I met 12 years ago, almost now.
He's going to tell the coffee shop story.
When I was on staff.
This is what you listen to the Lobby Podcast for, the inside baseball.
Yeah, you gotta tell the history, right? So we met about 12 years ago when I was on staff at Lobby. I was a policy lead in civil justice and employee relations, and we heard about this new up-and-coming, talented individual running for the state legislature, and they sent me out to go meet with her. We'd endorsed her, and we met on a little coffee shop out in her district, and here we are 12 years later, and I've been incredibly blessed to be the CEO of Lobby now, and you have had a incredible career. I just looked, and I think you were a career 92 to 95 legislative pro-business vote with Lobby and the business community.
I was trying to figure out what you were going with, like 92 to 95. I was like, I was 4 in 92. What are you talking about? I did not run for the legislature then.
Not year, score. And so just was an amazing pro-business leader for the state. And now you have transitioned into another leadership role for the state as Governor Landry's chief of staff. But speaking of kind of history in the past, I do want to ask you, you did have an amazing legislative career, and you championed a lot of bills and a lot of legislative measures that have helped move the state forward. But I wondered if there was one or maybe a couple that come to mind that you're just most proud of as you look over your incredible career in the state legislature.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I'll highlight a couple of things. And of course, as you know, my first couple of terms in the legislature were not always the most fun for me. Didn't particularly, no harm, no foul, but didn't particularly agree with the former administration much on policy. And so it was difficult because I felt like, as a legislator, and I don't know if everybody feels this way, but I think most do, like you want to be there, you want to serve a purpose, you want to do something good for the state, you want to move good policy forward. And, I just didn't really feel like I was afforded those opportunities. But I will say probably the highlight for me, my first couple of terms, I know this is a business podcast, but, I did get to fight for life a lot. Thankfully, Governor Edwards was a pro-life governor, and he did sign every piece of legislation that we sent through. And so, I think that if you can't fight for life, then, kind of why are we here? And I think that's kind of the initial fundamental thing that we should fight for, innocent life. But then, of course, in the last couple of years, as Governor Landry became governor, and I was afforded the opportunity to be chair of Ways and Means, which, somebody told me that, if you and the head of Lobby are not butting heads all the time as chairman of Ways and Means, then what are you doing, which I thought was kind of funny because I was like, well, I mean, I want business to improve in the state of Louisiana, and I want things to get better. And so it was like the first time that Will and I started butting heads on a couple of things. But, obviously remain friends and want to do what's best for our business community moving forward, and also be good stewards of the tax dollars. And so, I'm very thankful that in the last couple of years, I think we were able to push across the finish line a lot of things that you and I have both fought for. While I've been a legislator, while you've worked in state government, and obviously for Lobby. And so I think the big thing is, what I did learn is that we're always moving in the same direction and fighting for the same things, but you always want a little bit more, and I got to say, hey, we got to do this incrementally. And so I certainly learned that along the way. But look, I think, this is not something that I think everybody would say, oh, this is a really exciting, sexy thing. But for the business community, getting rid of the franchise tax, I think, was a huge thing. That's something that we've all fought for a long time. As I'm sure you remember, that bill was passed and vetoed a couple of times in the previous 8 years. And so, just a really unfair tax that pushes business away from Louisiana. Just 3 years ago, Louisiana had corporate income, franchise tax, and inventory tax. And that just sends a signal to people around the country and around the world that Louisiana is not open for business, that we don't want you here. And so thankfully, I think we were able to reverse a lot of that. We got rid of the franchise tax. We flattened and lowered corporate income. And then, we're hopefully well on our way to eliminating the inventory tax. I think we both know that that's going to be a little bit longer path. Obviously, we have to work with our local partners as they're the ones who collect that. But we have to work with our local partners to try to eliminate inventory. But I know even early on in Governor Landry's first year and when I was chair of Ways and Means and still in the legislature, that was just the number one thing he always talked about is, we got to get rid of the inventory tax. It's just a huge deterrent to business. It just doesn't make sense that you're penalized for the inventory you have. And then people have to jump through all these hoops and say, oh, well, we have a place in Texas or a place in Mississippi or wherever, so we got to move all of our inventory at the end of the year to another state and then come back, and it's just stupid, frankly. Look, I think, and I know we'll probably highlight this later, but May 16th, there's a measure on the ballot, Amendment 4, to work with our local partners to eliminate the inventory tax, and so I certainly encourage all of your listeners. And I know you guys have been very involved in it, to please go out and vote for that amendment so we can get well on our way to eliminating the inventory tax.
Yeah, so you hit it there, and I think you're being a little modest, but you did over the last couple of years champion and spearhead significant tax reform to make our state more competitive and to help make us a more attractive and affordable and transparent and predictable place to do business. You mentioned getting rid of the franchise tax, lowering and flattening the corporate income and personal income tax, and then we've now got an opportunity, a tremendous opportunity, to put the power into the locals' hands to make that decision whether or not they want to get rid of the inventory tax in May 16th. That's a tremendous opportunity. But the legislation you did champion, and it was complicated. It's, as you mentioned, for years, the business community tried to partner with the legislature to pass many of those things, and it just didn't get done. And you led the fight, got it done, and as a result, we've gone from the 40s down to the 30s in our tax ranking, which is tremendous. And so I think, as you mentioned, the next step to make us even more competitive and to encourage more businesses here and outside of the state to come is really that silver bullet of getting rid of the inventory tax, and then maybe we can start talking about centralizing our sales tax collection system, maybe.
Hey, I'd love to talk about that more. I'm not even going to beat around the bush. That's something I think we all know that we have to get to, because if memory serves me correctly, at this point, we're the only state in the country that has a decentralized sales tax collection. And not trying to make anybody nervous, because I think we've made it very clear to the locals that that's something we're interested in doing. We did this kind of streamlining sales tax collection that I guess we're kind of using technology to try to do it. And so that it's being paid in one place, but it's kind of automatically going out to the locals. And hey, look, anytime you do something new, there's going to be a couple of bugs and a couple of kinks along the way. But we're trying to get to that point. It's kind of a bridge to say, hey, let's try this out. Let's build up some trust, because hey, look, I get it. I guess the local fight on this is, okay, well, if we send our sales tax to Baton Rouge, are you guys going to send it back down? And hey, again, that's how it works in every other state. But I do get it, and there's always that trust factor. And so I'm not trying to discount the local concern, but I think even, everybody's reasonable. Like when you sit down and talk to the locals who have concerns about it, when you sit down and talk to them and say, look, we're the only state that does this, it's really, really burdensome on the business community. Our retailers, if they operate in all 64 parishes, they're having to pay sales tax in all these different places. It's incredibly complicated. So, look, I understand the power of our words now, but, at the end of the day, when we sit down and have these conversations, everyone understands the problem and that it is a burden on businesses. I think it's just kind of how we go about it, not trying to make anybody nervous. I think it's just kind of how we go about it and building up that trust, and whether or not this situation that we're working toward right now is going to work, kind of by using technology to automatically send it out, or we have to do something different. But I think we can all admit we've got to make it easier on our businesses, on our retailers, on for everybody that's doing business in the state of Louisiana, to make this a smoother process, because it is quite complicated. I mean, I don't have to do it personally in the business that I have, but whenever I watched the demonstration at the end of last year, actually it was my last meeting as chair of Ways and Means, but when they were giving a demonstration of how this new system works, it's better, but it was still incredibly complicated, and it just opened my eyes like, wow, this is what these guys have been having to do for years. So I think we can all sit at this table and say that it's got to get better. I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know how it's going to happen, but it is a huge problem. And frankly, to your point, it is the number one thing that is keeping us from increasing in rankings, because our sales tax rankings are so low because of the complication of how we do it and how many different taxing districts that we have locally. And so, I think we're like literally 50th in sales tax policy. Look, I feel like the Landry administration, like the motto is get us out of 50th. There's so many different things that we worked on, from education and workforce and job creation and tax policy, to just get us out of 50th. And thankfully, for a lot of them, we've gotten way out of 50th. I mean, we're in the 20s and 30s. And, I know at one point after we did the tax reform, and, I'm sure there's a lot of other states that have now seen what we did and trying to follow our leads. I don't know exactly where we're falling in the rankings right now, but, at one point after we did it, like our business tax climate was in the top 15. So that's just a huge, huge thing for Louisiana, because I think we went from like 42 to 15 or something like that. And so, it just sends a strong message that, Louisiana, we really are set up, as you know, and I'm sure you've said in many of your speeches, like we just have abundant natural resources. We have cheap power. We're right by we are the mouth of the Mississippi, our port system. I mean, we have a lot of amazing things going for us, and we're standing in our own way. So that's, at the end of the day, the legislature has to help, I say the legislature like I'm still in there, but that building over there, the legislature and the administration have to help us get out of our own way and create a better environment for Louisiana to thrive.
I do want to pivot a little bit because we're talking about that building over there, the Pointy building. And you highlighted some of your legislative wins, and you obviously are coming off of an incredible career in the legislature, but now you're transitioning into a new role. So we're week 2, I think, into session.
Yeah, into session, yeah.
And so I want to hear about how has this transition been, and what has been the most surprising thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. It was so interesting because, I've had a lot of questions. Even this morning, I had a meeting at 8 o'clock, and the guy was asking me, he's like, hey, was this something that was in the works? And I said, honestly, I was completely caught off guard, and I had no idea that was coming. When the governor called me and asked me about it, I was kind of speechless. I was like, am I being punked? Like, is this a real question? And then, the cool thing, I love this story because, the first week that I was officially on the job, we went to a meeting of Republican governors. And so, all the chiefs, they have like a chiefs dinner. And so I went to it, and they're all like, oh, like, how long have you been working for Governor Landry? I'm like, oh, like 3 days. And, they're like, really? Yeah, like literally 3 days. This is my 3rd day on the job. And we came up here for this meeting, which is a kind of a cool start. But then, they asked me how it came about. And I said, well, it is the most uniquely Louisiana story possible. He called me and he said, as y'all know, certainly, he's got this camp that's literally in the middle of the Atchafalaya Basin, so like in the middle of the swamp, that you have to get on a boat to get to it. And so I'm telling this story to all these folks from around the country, and I said, look, he called me and he was like, Julie, I want you to come over for a crawfish boil. And we're at the camp. So I said, I literally went to his camp in the middle of the swamp that you have to get on a boat to get to. You don't have to get on an airboat because that would have made the story even better, but you have to get on a boat to get to it. And they were having a big crawfish boil. and they built a fire, and he called me over there and said, I want to talk to you about something. I said, that's how he did it. And like their eyes are just big as golf balls. They're like,
that's not the normal chief of staff job interview in most states.
yeah, they were like, was there like an alligator sitting next to you? You know, I mean, it was just so funny. But yeah, no, look, I mean, I really appreciated the offer. It kind of came out of nowhere. I had no idea that he was even contemplating. But I will tell you, I knew I had to say yes whenever the first lady came around the corner and said, it was my idea. And I'm like, well, then I have to say yes. I mean, I cannot disappoint Sharon Landry. So, but no, look, I you know, as y'all know, like, we're from the same area. I've, you know, personally known Jeff and Sharon for a long time. And, you know, I appreciate his drive. Obviously, everybody knows he's got a lot of energy and, occasionally drinks an energy drink here and there too, but you know he's very motivated to change the state, and I do think he's been a change agent governor, and I really appreciate that because frankly, I think y'all agree the worst thing that we could have done for Louisiana was nothing. The status quo just wasn't acceptable anymore. So anyway, but you know that's kind of how it came about. The differences, you know, honestly, the first couple of weeks, you know, it was a lot and it was a different thing, like every 15 minutes of people calling me and, you know, trying to make sure that the governor had everything he needed, that I was meeting with and getting to know all of the staff, that I was listening to the legislators as they were preparing for session. So there's a lot of different things going on. But honestly, once the legislative session started, you know, I mean, it's the same building, it's the same thing, it's the same process. I'm just 3 floors up. I did tell the staff the other day, I said, y'all got to find me a bill that I can go testify on. Like, I'm getting the itch to go to the table and testify on a bill, you know. But yeah, it's just, you know, it's different, but still kind of the same. Surprising things, man, I don't know. I don't know that I've necessarily been super surprised by anything, but it's never boring. You know, and that's not surprising. I didn't ever think it was going to be boring, but it's definitely never boring because every single phone call, like I look down at my phone and I'm like, why is this person calling me? And you can never predict what it's going to be. So
that's exciting though. I mean, and I know you love that because I know you love policy and you know, you spent your career trying to move Louisiana forward. And you mentioned, you know, the governor, he demands action and he is passionate about doing things and doing them quickly and getting us out of last place, which was important because he was elected with a mandate to change the state, right? I mean, we were in the 40s in education. We were in the 40s in our tax climate. We had more population leaving the state than was coming in, and we weren't seeing the kind of investment across the South that our neighbor states were seeing, despite the fact, as you said, you know, we've got the economic aorta, the Mississippi River of this country right here and flows through Louisiana. We've got the abundant natural resources, cheap energy, water, and so as a result, you know, the governor, the leadership in the House and the Senate came together, looked at education, made a ton of great policy pushes on education, and we've gone from the 40s to the 30s. You know, as a result of a lot of the tax work that we just talked about, we've gone from the 40s down to the 30s in taxes. We've made other, you know, insurance reform, a lot of insurance reform to make our state more attractive for carriers to come and write, and we're seeing some big results there. And so we are seeing billions of dollars. I mean, we're almost at the $100 billion mark of projects being announced over the last couple of years. And so with that, and because we know this governor doesn't stand still, and now as you help guide and inform, what is, from your perspective and from the governor's perspective, what is the next step to continue, as we say at Lobby this year, going for growth?
Yeah, and you know, it's a good question because it's so funny. Like I think that the last couple of years he's done so much and pushed so much that everybody was just anticipating, like, okay, what's the next thing? Like, we're back at the starting line, let's go. And you know, it's funny because the conversations that he and I had, even when I was still in the legislature about preparing for session, and then certainly now, you know, working in his administration, you know, I mean, he told me, he said, look, I know that I've pushed everybody really hard. We've had multiple special sessions. We've made a lot of changes in the first couple of years. Now I think it's prudent to step back a little bit, watch to see how some of these reforms play out. We did the tax reform at the end of 2024, and a lot of things, honestly didn't even start taking effect until January of this year. And so, it's prudent to kind of sit back, see how the collections go, see how the growth goes, obviously on tort reform and insurance reform as well. This, like most people will tell you, it takes a couple of years to really start realizing some of those effects. And so we did a lot of that at the beginning of last year. Thankfully, I think they're starting to take effect and rates are starting to drop even faster than we anticipated. But I do think it's prudent to kind of see where we stand to understand the next steps. But, I think his big thing right now is not necessarily in the building and in the legislature. It's continuing to go out and tell the world what we've done and that we're certainly open for business because, hey, like I think we've massively exceeded expectations of getting, at this point, very close to $100 billion worth of investment. But like, why stop there? We have a lot of opportunities. We're working a lot with LED on, getting these areas site ready. We've made I think about $150 million investment in site preparation to make sure, because that was one thing that we were told, especially in the state of Tennessee, that they went out and developed land to have it ready so that when a business comes in and says, okay, we want to move, they're like, hey, we have a site all ready for you right now.
Is incredibly important, and we were behind on that, and so excited to know that y'all are partnering with LED to get these sites ready so that shovels can get in the ground, concrete can get poured, and business can get moving faster. That's great.
Yeah, and that was a huge initiative, obviously, of Secretary Bourgeois, and I'm sure you guys share my sentiment with this, but she's just a phenomenal LED secretary. She's gone out there and hustled, and everybody just respects the heck out of her, and so I really appreciate the job that she's done. Love working with her on a personal level, from carrying a couple of bills for them with some of their programs as a legislator, and then now working with her as a cabinet official. It's been great, but I think that's really the big thing. And we talk about this number like it's this kind of imaginary thing, but like this is not only record breaking as far as investment in the last couple of years. It's like shattering records in Louisiana of investment. And it's interesting because, we have all these announcements of things coming, but they haven't even totally come yet. So we haven't even begun to realize. I mean, they're announcing, they're doing groundbreakings, they're starting construction, but we haven't even really seen the full results. And, one thing I was super excited about in the governor's state of the state was talking about the average wage increasing like over the last 5 or 6 years from 48,000 to I was 61 or 62,000. And then the average job that's being offered by all this investment is like, I think in the 80s, like 87 or 85 or something like that. So that's the thing. Like, that is how you move your state forward. That is how honestly, that's how you reduce your budget. I remember there was a reporter who asked the governor, like, oh, well, if you have all these people moving to your state, then it's actually going to grow your budget because of, like Medicaid rolls. And it's like, no. What we're trying to do is help people not be dependent on the government. We're trying to create jobs for them to be able to reach independence and make way more money than they would get, being on Medicaid and being on assistance. That is the point of growing your state. It's not just about getting people in. It's about getting people in because you have great job opportunities. I totally reject that notion. I mean, obviously, we have to spend more money investing in our infrastructure, as you guys know. I mean, Louisiana, we're just unfortunately set up at this huge disadvantage of, we have soft soil, we have coastal erosion, we have a tremendous amount of water that we have to build bridges over, way more than any other state. And so we have to invest a lot more to get our state up to standard of infrastructure. But look, I know every single governor wants to be known as the infrastructure governor. I mean, everybody does. Everybody wants to build roads and bridges, and I think they all have. But I will say one focus of this administration has been doing it timely. We've invested more money and directed more funds into DOTD, but then also restructuring DOTD so that it is functioning better. We have the new highway priority program. Where we are doing bridge bundling, we're telling those leaders, Glenn Leday and Archie Chasson, were saying, hey, look, I mean, and I did this as a legislator, and then certainly now in this role, give us the projects that are shovel ready that you can complete within the fiscal year, because we don't want a whole bunch of, 5, 6, 7, 10 years from now, we'll be able to see this bridge built. We want to know what we can do right now to move Louisiana forward and progress it. And so, I think we just have a much better understanding of, you know how it goes in that building. And hey, look, I was the author of the capital outlay bill for 2 years. It gets political, and, members want to be able to go home and say, I got funding for this or that. And I'm appreciative of that, as long as it's road, bridges, water, sewer, real infrastructure. But at the end of the day, we want to show real results. And so it's become more about the priorities of the projects and what can actually get done versus the politics of it, which I think is really important. And I think it's an easy buzzword thing that you can say, but that's really, we've put it more in the hands of DOTD and said, bring us the list that you prioritize that you can get done instead of the other way around. And just giving them that ability and that flexibility, they're like, oh, really? Y'all want us to tell you? I'm like, yeah, we want you to tell us what you can actually get done within the next year. Because frankly, we put, I think it was $100 million into that bridge bundling program for 62 bridge repairs. And so, the speaker told him, he said, look, at the end of the fiscal year, I want to see how many bridges y'all have completed. It's a metric. It's not super hard. Of the 62, how many have you gotten done? Because that dictates whether or not we give you that same money the next year. So, look, I just think accountability, communication. Ryan Boriak is chairman of House Transportation. He's called in DOTD monthly to give a progress report. He said this multiple times, but we've gone from a 25% completion rate to a 94 or something of, timely completion. So just that kind of stuff, I think, just rebuilds trust of people and shows the locals that we're really investing those dollars into good infrastructure projects.
I do want to back up on something that you said earlier about all of the projects we have coming to the state. A huge priority of lobbies this session is workforce. And we saw some success yesterday in House Ed and some other committees. And the governor mentioned it a lot in his State of the State. And so I kind of want to end on that question. What do you, it seems like a very bipartisan effort around growing our workforce. Secretary Showen has done a great job in that vein with innovation and that. But want to get your thoughts on this session, how we can be helpful with workforce, and kind of where you see everything shaken out this session.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think it was a natural progression of, everything's kind of gone from Susan to Susie, right? And so, we were working a lot on getting that investment here, getting those businesses here. And it was funny because I'm going to pick on my friend, not really pick on him, but highlight my friend Richard Nelson a little bit because he started as Secretary of the Department of Revenue, and we worked a lot together on the tax reform issues. And then whenever he became, head of the LCTCS system, there were some questions like, oh, well, that's an interesting pick. How do you go from revenue to LCTCS? And I laughed and I said, honestly, I feel like I know exactly when that happened in his mind or when he wanted to pursue that, because we've been having so many conversations with Secretary Bourgeois, with, at the time, Secretary Nelson, about, hey, we accomplished what we wanted to accomplish in changing the tax code, in getting businesses here, but our next problem over the next couple of years, as all of these businesses complete their building process and opening, is going to be the workforce. And so, Richard is just a guy, and I know y'all know him very well, but he's just a guy that he sees a problem and he really wants to tackle it and solve it, and he's insanely intelligent, very nerdy. I say that in the most loving way. He's a policy nerd and a policy wonk, and so I just kind of saw his wheel spinning of okay, the next wave is going to be in our community and technical college system, because frankly, and you guys have been on the cutting edge of this too. Hey, love our four-year universities, and there's a lot of students that want to go to it. But in the workforce, one thing that America as a whole, and certainly Louisiana, is lacking is that 2-year degree where people can really get immediately into the workforce and, frankly, at this point, make more money. There's kind of a breakdown, I guess, with higher ed and some of the actual workforce needs. And so I think that LCTCS system is really filling that need. So all that to say, I'm glad Richard is there. We've kind of shifted over to really focusing a lot on LA Works and Secretary Showen. And so appreciate the job that she's doing. I literally had a meeting with her, ran into her at an event last night and was talking to her about this. And she's ready. She's excited. We know where the needs are. That's the cool thing about all this investment. Like whenever we have these meetings with these companies, they tell us exactly what they need. Like we're going to need this many jobs. These are the types of jobs we need, and we're going to pay well for it. I'm really excited for the future of Louisiana. I do think that we are going to open up a tremendous amount of job opportunities that people, and I'm not trying to say, I would never, again, I love our universities. I would never tell any student who says, I want to go to LSU and then I want to go to law school or med school or whatever. Yes, we need all of that. But there's a lot of students who that's just not their trajectory. That's not their desire. And we have to do a better job of opening up those doors to them and saying, this is the pathway to become a welder or an electrician or whatever it may be, because there's going to be a tremendous amount of those jobs coming up.
And by the way, that's a great career you can have, making a ton of money and benefits, and with just a certificate or a couple of years at a community technical college.
Like being a welder is hard, and if you're really, really good at it, you can absolutely make more money than a lawyer, sometimes a doctor. I mean, it's just, what I'm saying? Like there is a tremendous amount of opportunity there. And, I do think that we're preparing for it well. I think we very early on recognize that there's going to be that void there, and that we've got to get prepared in the next year or two to have those folks trained and have that pipeline into these new jobs coming to Louisiana.
Julie, thank you so much for taking the time this morning. Your leadership and your partnership and your passion for growth in the legislature is now, I know, transitioning into your new role as the governor's chief of staff. And so we, as the business community, as the state chamber, state manufacturing association, we're so thrilled to have worked with you over the last almost 12 years to move the state forward. And we're so excited to continue to work with you in your new role as we continue going for growth. And so thank you for some time this morning, and we just appreciate you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. It was fun.